So we're going to finish up a couple of sections that we've been working on, and this is kind of the random stuff that's really fun or really interesting that I want you to know, but we're not going to spend a ton of time on it because I want you to be able to look up some on your own. So what your assignment's going to be to go along with is take one of these things that I'm going to talk to you about today, and what I need you to do is I need you to do a little bit more research on it. And I want you to tell me 2 new things that you learned. So it cannot be something that I talked to you about here on these slides. It needs to be something new. So when you find the one that you want to talk about, make sure that you listen close so that you're not repeating something that I said, because I won't accept it if it's something that I told you. I'll just need you to go online, do some research, use reputable sources. Look for sources from .edu websites, educational sites. And don't go to places like Wikipedia. Try and find some really good sources in order to do that. Okay, so the first person we're going to talk about, his name is John Wesley Powell. So what this guy did is he went and he wanted to explore the rivers to take him to all of the unexplored areas in Utah. So at this point on the map, you'll see a bunch of places that are established, a bunch of places where you know exactly what's there, and then there's kind of like this fuzzy area, and they just called it an unexplored area. And so there's some things that they think is there, like we know there's a river here, we know that this river ends up here, so here's how it maybe goes through, but really they have no idea. So what he does is he goes along and he wants to explore all of these areas. He's actually a geologist and he's looking for samples, so he takes a team to do that. If you look at his boat right there, you'll notice that he's got like a kitchen chair inside of it. It's because he wants to be able to see what he's doing. So he gets a chair and sets it in so he can sit up higher and figure out what's going on. Well, things get a little rough. This is an unexplored area, and so there are going to be like Native Americans that he's going to try and get some help from when they're starving that he gets no help from. There's going to be what feels like really big rapids coming up. So what happens is they go to try and get help from the natives and they get lost a little bit. They get next to nothing. So one guy's like, forget this. And he's like, I would rather die than keep doing this. So he took off and left and no one saw or heard from him again. At one point, there's these huge rapids going on that are coming upriver. And so what they decide to do is they all write letters to their loved ones. They split into 3 groups. John Wesley Powell and another guy, 2 other guys decide to go downstream, and then the other guys separate into 2 groups and they never find him again. So they go down, the rapids end up not being quite as bad as they thought, and then at that point they're popping out of the Green Canyon. There's a Mormon village right there and they feed them. So they make it. They actually send back rescue teams to go try and find the other groups, and they never find them. So they end up being lost. But he is the first to go all the way through the Green River, the Colorado River, all the way down and clear to the end of the Green Canyon without stopping. Next is a place called Hole in the Rock. Hole in the Rock is not like the place that they end up forever, but this is a really kind of crazy, amazing thing that they ended up doing in order to do that. So at this point, we've talked about why Mormons settle different places. They've got very specific reasons. Well, they were told that they need to go settle the plateaus in southeast Utah. In order to do that, they had to hike across like the top of the plateaus. But then at one point, they're like, we need to get down to the river so that we can just take the river across to where we need to go. In order to get down the river, that bottom picture, you can see the white line that goes down. That's how far they had to go and get their wagons down from in order to get to the river. It's over a 3,000 foot elevation drop. Okay, they have no way to get down there. They have no like magic elevators. They have to take their wagons, their horses, all of the things to go get on boats to go the rest of the way where they need to establish. It takes them over 6 weeks to do it. And it's that picture on the top is like a painting of it. Right now, you can actually go there and you can use like 4-wheelers and razors and stuff to go down it. But what they essentially did is they burrowed a hole through the rock so that their horses and their wagons could go through. They would have to put like almost ladder rungs on it so that they wouldn't just slide down face first, but it would just slowly go down. Allow them to stop and stuff like that. Once they did that, they still had 10 weeks where they had to float along the river, which is like crazy long time to spend on a riverboat. Okay, the places they settled there are down in like southeast Utah, Bluff, Monticello, Blanding. I don't know if you guys have ever been to those places, but I feel like Blanding is an accurate name to kind of describe them. There's not a whole lot there. They like rangeland, irrigate, try and make some crops, that kind of stuff. Okay, next up we're going to talk about a place that's called Josibub. This is an establishment of Hawaiian and South Pacific Mormon converts. What they did is they were converted by a guy named Joseph Fielding Smith, and I totally abbreviated him because it's a long name. So this is not the same Joseph Smith that was in New York when we first started talking about the Mormons. This is a totally different guy. That's why the F is in there. Remember, the other guy died. So when he's 15 years old, he is asked to go to Hawaii and these South Pacific Islands and start to convert people on a mission. He does it, and he's really successful, and these people want to come and be with the other Mormons, and they want to see their temple and do all of these things. So they come and they create this establishment by Twila, and it's called Josippa. Josippa is directly translated into Joseph. So they name it after him. So that's in Twila. Pretty soon there's a temple, a Mormon temple that's announced in Hawaii. What they do then is a vast majority of them left and went back to the island. They're like, we're going to help build it. We're going to go back home. We're going to go back to, tropical paradise instead of flat rangeland. Okay, the ones who didn't leave moved to Salt Lake or other surrounding cities and moved out of Josippa. So this is actually a ghost town today. There's no one who lives there now. Okay, next up we're going to talk briefly about the religions. Most of the time I break this down a little bit more, but I feel like for the time we have left, a small overview will work just fine. Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about this guy whose name is Reverend Lawrence Scanlon. That's the guy there on the left. He is the first person to come in and have a consistent non-Mormon congregation. He came over when there's only 800 people here who are part of his congregation. He's like, you know what? I need to be there. I need to do it. He was not one to fight with the Mormons or do anything. In fact, he taught the Mormon Tabernacle Choir the music for Mass, and they came and the Mormon Tabernacle Choir actually sang it in his cathedral. The picture there on the right is called the Cathedral of Madeline, and that is the one that's on South Temple, right in downtown Salt Lake, really close to the Mormon temple. So it is there, and that is this guy's. He actually died shortly after this was finished, and he's buried in it or right underneath it. This is not super weird for the Catholic religion. A lot of popes and stuff are buried inside of their churches. It's weird to us here because we don't see that happen a lot, but it's a pretty normal thing. Okay, he was the first he was the first one who came and did that, but we're seeing a lot of different full-time established and fully functioning religions outside of the Mormon community. Remember when Brigham Young set this up, he really wanted it to be this little isolated Mormon bubble. It's totally not. Different religions are coming in, all sorts of groups are coming in that aren't just one or two here and there, but full congregations that live here full-time. All right, next let's talk about schools for a little bit. There is no such thing as a great big public education that's educating every single kid like what you guys get to have here. There's no money in training for teachers or schools. If you wanted to have a good education, you better hope that your parents have a ton of money because it costs a ton of money to have a full-time private tutor. The Protestant schools are a group of Protestants, again, and outside of Mormon religion, and they went and they created a bunch of schools to really educate the people, especially women. There was a bunch of groups of just women who would finance this kind of stuff. Okay, so now we have a somewhat reliable church. In fact, the church that they started is called, I think it's Wasatch Academy. I could be a little off on that, but the school still exists. Okay, it is like it's a charter school now, but it's really cool. Has ties clear back to the beginning. Okay, another school we're going to talk about is called the University of Deseret. It was open for only 2 years before it closed because it ran out of money. It ended up reopening in about 1900. It moved from downtown up to the East Bench, and today we call it the University of Utah. So if you are a Ute fan, it originally started the University of Deseret, but remember, we are not the state of Deseret, so they changed it, University of Utah. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about is the Brigham Young Academy. I bet you can guess what that one turned into. This one was actually started by the government. This was not a Mormon school. The Mormons eventually bought it, and the church currently and back then runs it, but that's not how it always was. Okay, so moving beyond schools, one more note on them. There was no such thing as high school. So like if you wanted any sort of beyond elementary school education, you had to go to college. So it was kind of cool that they had them. Classes were like 2 or 3 people, and it was ridiculously cheap compared to what it is now, but you have to take into consideration the value of the dollar and stuff like that. That's a whole nother talk. Okay, another thing we are going to talk about is electricity. Before electricity came, there is like a complete shutdown of the entire world at dark. Imagine the winter when it gets dark at like 4:30, the entire state shuts down. If they were walking around, it was actually crazy dangerous. Imagine someone left like barbed wire and fencing stuff, and you were walking and it's completely dark and you have nothing to assist you, and you fall and you trip and you break your leg and you cut yourself open and you get like gangrene and die. A little extensive, but you get my point. The first time they actually saw electricity was at a traveling circus, and I get that pictured on the bottom. It's not an old-time circus. There was no such thing as camping trailers and cars. It's just to help you kind of visualize it. The circus came into town. They had electricity, so they're like, sweet, this is what we need. And so they ended up starting to do it. Electricity was not monitored at the beginning, neither were like anything. And so there's multiple power companies, electricity companies that were around. Okay, mines and factories got power, which means that they could work more effectively. They could start earlier and work later. So all of a sudden, during the winter, they could be a lot more profitable because they didn't have to shut down and only abide by sunlight times. Then we also get streetcars and trains. So the top picture is actually a streetcar. I want you to think like San Francisco walking along, and then you just jump on the cars that goes by and the sides are open and you can go. That's a streetcar. When they were redoing Center Street last year, they were tearing up the road. They actually found some of the original streetcar tracks that were underneath the road because Logan had streetcars. The streetcars ran from like Logan up. They also went to Lagoon and Saltaire, which was the first amusement park in Utah. Was a place called Saltaire, and that is one of the things you can research for me. Okay, real quick, we'll end on telephones. Telephones are something that we take for granted because we totally and completely use them all day, every day in today's world.